Welcome to Fly on the Wall podcast. I'm your host, Chris Sonkson, CEO and founder of Church Boom. Here you get to sit in on a live coaching session as I coach pastors through the ministry challenges we all face. If you find this podcast helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. Hey everyone, welcome to Fly on the Wall. Today we are talking with Rob Shepard, a great friend of mine that lives in Virginia and has an incredible church there. Just love this guy. Every time we get together, we laugh, and he's just a fun guy to be around. But today we're talking about what every pastor should be asking. And it is an incredible time together, great conversation together. I know that you're going to enjoy it. So let's jump into it as we discover what every pastor should be asking. So good to see you, brother, and thanks for being on the call today, and hanging out. This is Rob Shepard from not Newport News. No, I'll get it. It's not Hampton. It's Yorktown, Virginia. First time I ever met Rob, he told me that he was from the Hamptons, and I was like, "Wow, dude!"
That's how we roll.
Yeah. I was like, "This guy's from the Hamptons. He's cruising around in a 1984 Honda Civic. It's not matching up."
Yeah, we can't afford that other S. We're just Hampton.
That's true. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
It's the S, huh? There's one more letter.
It.
Yeah. Yeah, when he told me he lived in the Hamptons, when he said, "Man, I lived in the Hamptons," I'm like, "What? The Hamptons? You know, the Hampton. Just slightly different. Not hugely different, slightly different." Yeah. Well, man, hey, good to be on the call with you, man. I'll always love coaching you and hanging out with you. So let's talk, man. What's on your mind today?
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. One thing that I'm constantly wrestling with is trying to coach my own staff. And one thing I heard you say a long time ago was that a pastor's whisper is a yell. And so I try to coach my staff as gently as I can. And I'm not a type A leader. I'm not one that's like yelling or fussing. But even in coaching them, anytime I give instruction, it seems to come with like some defensiveness of just like they feel like I'm coming down hard on them when I'm just trying to understand or coach. And so I was just wanting to pick your brain about that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the actual quote is, "Your whisper is a shout," not a yell, not a screaming and crushing.
It's a shout. Well, that's my first problem. I misquoted you.
Exactly.
We can just wrap up.
Problem one. Yeah, we're done. Rob's misquoting, and he's doing it from his home in the Hamptons. Well, tell me, so your whisper is a shout, and I know I get what you're saying, but in your scenario, like, give me an example of how that works. So what I'm hearing you say is, hey, someone will kind of say something to me on my team, I'll kind of come back, we'll talk about a little situation, or, maybe a little coaching, maybe give them some advice, and then somehow it turns into much more. Like, give me a scenario how that happens.
So we're having a staff meeting and going around talking about our teams and recruiting for our teams. And it was shared that a potential breakdown in our staffing was training and making sure that our new volunteers are trained before they start. And when I heard that, I was like, well, we have a system in place. I'm not sure like where the breakdown is. Why isn't this getting done? So I just asked, I said, did I hear what you said right? Or are you saying that we're not training for this team? We're not training them before they start. And it led to a huge, not like it wasn't like a fight, but it just led to tears started being shed. It was like this whole big thing of like not feeling like she was doing her job and like all this stuff. And I was like, all I asked was just like, I just want clarification so we can fix. If it's a broken system, I want to fix it.
Yeah. Well, okay, a couple thoughts. I'm just throwing this out there. I don't know the whole situation, and we don't need to know who that person is, but do you think that when you look over the times that's happened, I'm sure that's one example, you probably come up with another one or whatever, with maybe someone else, or a year ago or 3 years ago, you thought of this thing that, do you think that, first question, do you think it is largely part of the way that they're wired? Or is it more on the way that you would talk to them?
I think it's more the way that they're wired. I don't think people like to be coached very, very much, even when it's gentle. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a couple things. One, my own coach, I have a couple coaches, had the same coach for 13 years. And I was telling him one time years ago about a staff member, and I was like, man, they always respond. They always respond. They're just so wired this way. And he's like, did you not know this going into it? And I said, no. And he says, isn't that kind of on you? Uh, and I was like, oh, I didn't really like that. And plus I'm paying him for this, ripping me. But I do think there's a question of, because I know you and you're a pretty gentle person. So someone that gets offended by you, usually my thought is you're the kind of guy that I think if someone got offended by you, I'd probably think, that person telling me is probably the problem, because you're just a very gentle and very kind and gentle individual. So that's why I asked that question. It's like, okay, but who is on this team, and is that part of the problem? Second, that's the first thing I would ask is like, is that part of our hiring process? Is that part of our vetting process to know, like, this is the way they're wired? They can handle honest conversations. They're okay with honest conversations, or are they quickly defensive, quickly get upset, quickly feel attacked? I'd want to know that going into it, and being a part of, hey, if you're going to join that leadership team, I got to know how you're wired, or otherwise that's going to create quite a bit of problems. The second thing I think that is important is establishing up front, and I'm not saying you haven't done this, because I know you have, but I think it's important to establish up front, even when the person's getting hired, this is one of our cultures. We live by the Matthew 18 culture, or we live by honest conversation, or we live by transparent. We live by points of accountability. That's another thing that I think would be important to do. The third thing I would add in there is, and this is probably something that could be worked on in the staff and with key leaders, is knowing, teaching, and making sure that accountability flows not only from top to bottom, but from left to right. That peer-to-peer accountability. I think you and I have talked about that before. That's a culture. So here's the thing why I like left to right accountability, peer-to-peer accountability. Because if accountability only goes from top to bottom, then you're always the bad guy. If accountability only goes from top to bottom, it's like everybody else thinks I'm great, except for when I talk to you. Versus learning and creating a culture of, no, we actually have accountability that does go from top to bottom, there's no doubt, but we also have accountability that goes left to right. We have that accountability to talk to each other as the children's pastor talks to the worship pastor, or vice versa, and says, hey, man, you're always late to meetings, and dude, a couple times you rolled your eyes during the meeting, and maybe pastor hasn't seen it, and you might want to watch that. Like that kind of honest conversation will make the top to bottom not feel like the only time it's correction or coaching or anything is only when I hear from the top guy. No, it's actually just who we are. Not that we're being mean, not that we're being mean-spirited or artificial harmony or any of the stuff that you and I have talked about before, but it's a matter of, no, we create a culture of accountability. We create a culture of transparency. And it can't just flow from top to bottom. Otherwise, you're always the bad guy. It has to flow from left to right.
That's good.
And if it can do that, because I do know that you have a staff culture that you've talked about. So knowing you really well, I would say, one, knowing who we're bringing on the team, like, can they handle that? And having that honest conversation with them up front, like, hey, you got to be able to handle that, and figuring out if they can. I think that you're clear about your staff culture. I think you've been very clear about that. But I don't think left to right is happening very much in your team. And if that becomes the norm, then you're just one of 6 voices. If it doesn't become the norm, you're the only voice. And I think it's better peer-to-peer. Patrick Lenciani talks about that a lot.
So how do I encourage that left to right accountability?
Yeah, that's great. I think you have to bring it right out and talk about it. I don't know if you have to go through the entire 5 dysfunctions of a team, or I think it's in that book, but maybe there's a chapter or 2 you copy off and just kind of like, hey, let's just kind of read this, guys, and being able to, I think a couple things. One, being able to teach it, I think is important. You're the leader. They need to hear from you as, hey, this is what I'd like to see happen. But just because you teach it one time doesn't mean they're going to walk out and start doing it. That's probably not going to happen. But I would when opportunity shows up. If someone says something to you, I think it's quick to be able to say, why haven't you talked to them about that? Well, I'm not their boss. Yeah, but we have peer-to-peer accountability. Because it probably happens every now and then. Like, hey, pastor, I don't want to complain about the children's or youth or whoever, but this, and this. Okay, why haven't you talked to them? Or why haven't you shared with them? I think it's both teaching it. I think culture is always created by what you promote and what you allow. And so if you're promoting it through the teaching and you're allowing it by calling people out on it when it's like, hey, you should, and I know your executive pastor, great guy, awesome. Even him can kind of play in that. He can reinforce that and be able to say, hey, we need to be able to do this among the team. So I think it's teaching it, and I think it's calling it out when you see it. And be able to say, you probably don't need to talk to me about this. Sounds like something that why can't you just go talk to them and tell them that? Why can't you call them out on it in a positive way? Because I don't think I would probably guess it's not happening.
Yeah, that's good.
But if it does, it becomes the culture. It doesn't just become the dictator, the guy, but it becomes the culture.
That's good.
Yeah. So I'd teach it and reinforce it. And I'd get your XP to reinforce it as well.
That's good.
I would definitely reinforce it. And I think if you reinforce it and call it out when you see it, man, it can start changing.
That's great. Yeah, thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. What else you got?
Well, so when it comes to making decisions, what are some filters that you use? Because I tend to be an ideas guy, and I have more ideas than I have money or time. So how do you decide, what?
Even living in the Hamptons.
In the Hamptons, that's right.
I don't have enough money. Right. Well, when you live in a $6 million home, dude, what do you think's going to happen?
It's tough. More money, more problems.
That's right.
So what filters do you use to help make sure that the decisions are the right decisions and are helping us stay on mission?
Yeah. A few thoughts. One, I always tell everybody, and I always promote, man, create questions that make sense. I think that's such a powerful thing when you create questions that become a document by which you have to live by, because you are an idea guy. Dude. Every time we talk, you have a new idea. You're always writing great books. You write great books. You write way better than I do, and you have great ideas. But sometimes our great ideas get ahead of ourselves, and I think that's a challenge. So coming up with those 6 or 8 questions, like, okay, do we have enough money? Is this the right time? Is this the right resource? Is this the right idea? Is this is this going to take us out of our, what are we going to have to stop in order to start this? I think having those honest conversations also helps you not be the bad guy. So you're able to say when someone has an idea or concept, it's not like, okay, well, Rob's just firing questions at me. No, we're going to go to this document that we all agree upon that is how we filter any decision we make on any idea or, any big idea, campaign, project, or whatever it may be. I think that's one thing. The second thing is I think people tend to drift out of their lanes pretty easy. I'm always asked, what would you tell your younger self? That's what you get when you start having grandkids. What would you tell your younger self? I'm not 90, but I don't know. I can't see you. Who said that? One thing is I have had a habit, and if I'm not careful, I still do it, as I can quickly drift into different lanes because I get excited about something. It's a great idea. It's like, it's a great idea. It's not the best idea. It's not the right time. It's not the right, might be a year from now, but it's not. And I think you have to be able to stay in your lane and just know, man, this is who we are. This is what God's called us to be. This is direction that I'm going. I don't want to go here. I want to go there. This is where I'm headed. This is what God's called me to do. I think that there are seasons in my life that I could have made more progress, that I could have built a bigger, stronger church, bigger, stronger ministry, bigger, stronger coaching organization, whatever it is. There's times in my life where I feel like I could have built bigger. I probably could have made more progress during those 2 years, but I was I was chasing it over here. And I remember, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years ago, a board member in one of our, I was having a board meeting, and we have some really sharp board members, very, very done very well with their lives. And I remember one of them said, man, you're always chasing the new shiny coin. And I was like,
yep.
You're right. And I'm thinking they all see it. It's like I come in there with all these ideas. It's like, can you just give us the 3 things that we're going to do, and let's just be the best at those 3 things. And I wish I wouldn't have chased every single idea. I wish I would have filtered it more. I wish I would have asked harder questions to myself. I wish I would have allowed other people to ask harder questions to me. I wish I would have done that. And I think during certain seasons, I think that I would have had greater productivity. I think my productivity is less in certain seasons because my energy is split. And as the board member said, chasing the new shiny coin. Anyway, I don't know if you've ever felt that before.
I feel that all the time.
You're just like, stay over here, stay in your lane. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Anyway, that's what I would do. And I think I think the word self-imposed is really what I wish I would have grabbed that phrase a little bit more in the past, where it's like self-imposed for Rob Shepard, self-imposed guidelines, self-imposed restrictions, self-imposed questions, self-imposed vetting process. In other words, I'm the boss. I'm pretending like I'm the boss. I can kind of do what I want. Because I can do what I want, I better self-impose all of this so that I'm focused on this and I'm going about what I need to be doing and what I know God's called me to do. And that's, when I look at certain leaders across the nation that I think are killing it, I had an opportunity, I don't know, I've spoken with Mark Batterson many times. And he's a great author, and everybody knows him. Great author, great pastor and leader. And I've had several conversations with him over the years here and there. And I remember one time he told me, he's pulling back quite a bit. And if you actually think about when's the last time you saw his picture on a conference, it's been a while. I just saw one recently on there. It's a Zoom conference thing. And I'm like, about, I don't know, 5 years ago, he just said, I'm getting so out of my lanes. I want to stay in my lane. I am called to be a pastor first. And I was really, really admired the fact that he recognized the lanes that he was drifting in and that he was able to pull back. And I think he's experiencing incredible success at his church right now, and it's probably because he self-imposed it. His gifting could take him into a lot of lanes, but you got to self-impose that. And so
that's good.
Anyway, I don't know if
that's very helpful. No, that's really good. That's good.
Cool. What else you got? Anything else on your mind today?
You got time for another one?
Yep. Let's do one more.
What is a question that you wish church leaders were asking?
Man. Pre the pandemic, I don't think I would have ever thought this. Not because I didn't care about it, just because I don't think I recognized the problem. I think, as I always say, crisis speeds up failures, and crisis always exposes weaknesses. And so the one thing that I've thought about as churches have come back, many of them not at the number they used to be, some are at the number, some above it. But overall, not. I just saw another article. I was preparing for kind of a church rescue moment that I'm having with a bunch of people to kind of share with them what we're doing with rescuing churches across the nation, and all the churches are dying. And I came across this article about that, about how many churches haven't come back strong, how many shut down, all that stuff. I say all that to say, coming out of the pandemic, now we're here in so many churches that have not, is because, and I wonder this question. I wonder if we were building churches, many of us, me included, where people's only thread to their faith was church attendance. So if you look at it as a thread, if the only thread between them and their faith was church attendance. It wasn't Bible, wasn't reading, praying, knowing God, drawing in deep, whatever else. It was just one thread between church, our faith is attached to church attendance. And as soon as that church attendance was pulled away, so was their faith.
Wow, that's good.
And I look at that and I think, man, did a lot of us make that mistake? And not to say we're not going to reach people and be, modern and have I'm not saying all that, but have we given enough thought to how we both build the crowd and build the Christ-like follower? Have we done both? And I don't know if we have. And so if I could, that would be a question I think that we should all be pondering.
That's good.
And believe me, I'm all about growth. Church Boom is about growth. We're about rescuing churches and growing. Don't get me wrong. But somewhere we've got to put some energy and focus to say, okay, are we building a crowd, which is important. Don't get me wrong. We got to build people. We got to get people to church. But are we also building Christ-like followers? And that may be the reason. Because, when you talk to I had a buddy of mine's church runs around 6,000. Right now they're at about 4. And I'm like, 2,000 people just all of a sudden in your city decided we're not going to go to church anymore. You didn't tick them off. They didn't get mad. They just decided they weren't going to go to church anymore. Is that really the problem? I don't know if 2,000 people just said, forget God and forget it all. I just think 2,000 people had the thing that was the only thing that was attached to their faith pulled away from them. And so if you cut the string, you fall. And that's the question I think people should be asking.
That's a good question. That's solid.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, hey man, I gotta jump and jump on. I got another Zoom call coming up here, but always great to see you, buddy. Appreciate you so much, man.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate your time.